Hey guys, hello. Welcome to the latest episode of the Footnotes podcast with me, your host, Bonisile. I am going to be talking today about Arsenal's wealth and how that's connecting with maybe what we're seeing in wealth in terms of like the number of players that Arsenal are trying to integrate. Um, it's been quite rough for those of us who are Arsenal fans to watch the last three games specifically. And I want to say this with mindfulness in that like the last game that we saw, actually Arsenal played okay. However, the problem is with getting players back, I think Mikel Arteta is gonna have to do something that we may have seen it in the beginning of the season had not there been so many injuries for him and his coaching staff to deal with. I think part of the struggle for Arsenal is the fact that you have about two different front threes you can put in and probably several midfielders that you're not using because you have Declan Rice and Zubimendi in midfield. And those two guys, if you have them as a coach, I understand why you wouldn't want anyone else seeing any game time. The problem is when you do that, then you're having a lot of other guys who are not getting maybe the level of rhythm to the level of rhythm that you want to be in as a pro. So there's a lot of things. I mean, first of all, I've been frustrated watching Arsenal against Wolves. That was a very weird game to watch, to limp to the finish line the way we did. And then I watched us play Everton. We were a bit more controlled and a bit more measured in the way we approached that game. But I think because of that, you playing again with a set defense in front of you, which leaves you with, if you're playing with Gyökeres and a Martinelli, for example, which in some of these games, we've played with those two guys in that front three next to Saka. Saka can play in a transitional game. Saka can play in a game that's low block and you're trying to carve it open and you to create chances for your team that way. But most of the time, Martinelli and Gyökeres, I think, thrive with a bit more space to run in behind. And when I looked at the Wolves game, Wolves were always going to sit deep. And I spoke about this in the previous podcast, which was specifically about Wolves. They did exactly what they needed to do. They got embarrassed by Manchester United at home. And so going to, a title challenging Arsenal team away from home, they were always going to hunker down and try to, make it as difficult as possible. And in that game, Arsenal started with Martinelli on the left, Gyökeres in the middle, with Saka on the right. Midfield of basically not Odegaard, Eze, because Odegaard didn't start that game. But Zubimendi and Rice always start, it seems, and that's something else that maybe we can talk about in terms of Arteta trying to find solutions. But I think that's part of the struggle. Like, sometimes I think because he's now got all of these forwards that he didn't have at the beginning of the season, he's trying to first build relationships. And at the same time, he's also trying to get these guys in rhythm with each other. You know what I mean? Like the relationships will build and kind of everybody will start to understand each other's preferences, where you like to get the ball, where you like to, the spaces you like to run into. And the midfield will have to learn and understand that fast. But the other part of it is for him, whilst trying to build his relationship, is also, I think, as a manager, he has to think about which players suit what style of game. But the problem is we're playing low blocks every weekend. You don't have then the chance to, say, this guy will play this game, this guy will play that game, because almost every weekend, all our players have to kind of learn to play in against a low block. Because if you're playing for this Arsenal team and the coach's approach is to say, this player can't play against a low block, and I know I've said this about Martinelli especially, I think you are probably not going to get a lot of game time. If the manager is using that logic, a logic that I have subscribed to in the past, that, okay, Martinelli struggles against these kinds of teams. It seems like every team now approaches Arsenal the same way. And so at the end of it all, I think Arteta kind of has to play these guys and they have to go through the growing pains. And the next game after Wolves was Everton. There was a week in between. And I think, again, Arteta should have known, and I think he did know, that Everton were not going to play a basketball game. In fact, they were going to keep it as tight as possible, which is what most teams do against Arsenal. And Everton had lost several of their players. So, like, I would have expected us to show a little bit more urgency in the way we played the game at Everton. But it didn't turn out to be that way. And I think Arsenal actually were in better control of that game than, and they were in control against Wolves too. It's just like, the problem is it's hard to control games when you, how do I say this? When you are either at 0-0 and at 1-0. You can't really feel like you have totally controlled the game when you've played that way. And so the problem with Arsenal's attack is I think, first of all, we have talent up front that needs more opportunities to convert one. Gabriel Jesus is an example, and I'm talking about like Everton now, but I'll get to the game yesterday in a little bit. So the problem Arteta has right now is that Gyökeres, who's been brought in as a striker to kind of help with the goal struggles, he is not at the moment living up to what a lot of people expected. I kind of was conservative in my expectations of Gyökeres. I thought he could get anywhere between 10 to 20 goals, probably somewhere in the middle of that range. That's what I thought we would get from him in the Premier League. If he played 30 plus games, I thought he would get anywhere between 10, like 1 in 2 or maybe 1 in 3, worst case, right? And it, as he was starting to get used to the team, he had an injury which kept him out of the team for about a month or so. And now he's kind of playing himself back into fitness again, which I think he's going to be fitter quicker than he was at the beginning of the season. But the problem is, when you get that time off, you have to come back. And now there's a lot more guys as well who need game time. Jesus, for example, hasn't played with Gyökeres before Gyökeres was injured, right? I don't know how to say his name. Sometimes I say Gyökeres, sometimes I say Gyökeres. So like the problem for Arteta is trying to figure out building these relationships. And he had to go again with a different front three against Everton. It was Gyökeres, Saka, Trossard. And then in midfield, instead of Eze at Everton, it started with Eze at home against Wolves. At Everton, he went with Odegaard. Eze didn't even leave the bench on this day against Everton. The subs were Martinelli, Jesus, and Merino. So I think the struggles with this attack for me is going to be like how quickly and how well Arteta solves this attacking struggle is going to determine how well Arsenal do this season. Because defensively, Arsenal are consistently at the top level of their performance. Even though the defense has been destabilized quite a bit in the last month and a half, like mid-November till about now-ish, I would say the defense is still what keeps Arsenal in games. And I know the forwards are involved in defending, but I think our forwards need to take, whether through coaching or through like just an approach conversation about what to do when we have the ball with the coaching staff. I think we need to be a little bit more urgent in the way we move the ball, and we need to be more prepared to gamble. And that's not a word I can connect with the manager. And I love what he's done, and I still believe in what he's capable of doing with this team, Arteta. However, I worry about his unwillingness to put jeopardy into games and trusting the talent he has to outperform the talent on the other side of the battle or the contest. I think he is trying to manage too much at times. He's too forensic sometimes in the way he approaches the game, in my view, and that kind of, you can see that in the statistics of most games Arsenal play in. Arteta's Arsenal is fairly consistently winning the underlying metric battle, fairly consistently winning the XG battle in most games Arsenal goes in. Like even against Everton, it was 2 XG and they allowed 0.20 xG, and they had 2.0 xG. And shots, Arsenal had 13 versus 12. Versus 5, and Arsenal had 2 shots on target though of the 13. And Everton basically on shots on target, we had 1 more than Everton. We had 3 big chances, they had 0. The game still ended 1-0. So this is why I'm talking about the attack as the one thing that I'm not revealing anything here that's newsworthy, but I'm trying to make sense of why the attack is not working. And I think because maybe for once in Arteta's tenure, he has options. And unfortunately for him and for those of us who are of the Arsenal persuasion, Arsenal also have not had an opportunity so far this season to have betted a lot of these talents in, and I think the wealth of talent is making it a bit more complicated for Arteta and his coaching staff to integrate everybody. And because by now, you're expecting a team to be playing a little bit more fluently. And it looks like we're playing well in patches. But the 1-1 frustrating game against Crystal Palace yesterday is one that gives me hope and frustration at the same time. The frustrating part is our opponents, again, was dominated, alarmingly so. Like Arsenal had 69% of the ball for the entirety of the game, created opportunities about 2.73 xG, Palace at 0.91 xG, according to FOTMob. Yet, from the 25 shots Arsenal generated versus Palace's 8, 7 shots were on target for Arsenal versus Palace's 1. 4 big chances created by Arsenal versus Palace's 1 big chance created. We had 4 big misses. Created 4 big chances, missed all 4. Palace created 0 big chances. The game ended 1-1, and we, again, were beneficiaries of an own goal. This is the kind of thing that may be worthy of debate. Was Arsenal's decision to go for an attack that was going to do things by committee, as a collective, sharing goals, spreading them around? Was that maybe the right approach from the club and the coaching staff to take? Or was the better approach maybe to go and get 1 or 2 superstars like the Liverpool way, which nothing is foolproof, by the way, right? Because Liverpool got Ekitike and Isak. Isak is injured. Now they're going to have to rely heavily on Ekitike, right? Who seems capable of being relied on, especially if you can reintegrate Salah back when he comes back from AFCON. There's a point of conversation there as to like Arsenal's approach to the transfer window, going for good talents, but lots of talents which are not maybe best in class for what it is they do, right? We do have a frontline player in Saka who can be trusted in big matches consistently, but I can't name another Arsenal player in those front 3 positions that can produce at the same level. The next guy in line is Leandro Trossard, but he is a bit of a distance away from Saka's ability to deliver in the big moments in those front 3 positions. And unfortunately, that the best bet at the center forward position, in my opinion, right now, seems to be still Kai Havertz, who is, was hardly played in 2025. So how do they sort this out? I don't know. I know that Arteta tends to find solutions more often than not, and I back him to find solutions for this one too. But he's going to have to work fast, because to generate 25 shots, 7 shots on target, that's still a low count. That's less than half of the chances you created that were on target. I know there was a narrow miss by Jesus, which was, still wide, but it's so close. But that's the kind of thing. Gabriel Jesus had the most Gabriel Jesus game against Crystal Palace. He was very busy. He was very creative. He was a nuisance. He made the keeper make 2 really good saves, one from the header, and the second one was a shot which led to the corner that Arsenal scored from, or the own goal came from, that gave Arsenal the 1-0 lead. How to solve this thing is going to be probably the biggest challenge. It seems like Arteta finds answers for defensive problems. We've lost Gabi, we've lost Saliba for stretches this season so far. We've now lost Ben White, who hardly ever played, and we've lost him again. And I trust Arteta to find the solutions defensively. I even trust him to find the offensive solutions. How long it takes him to find them, though, is where I'm hopeful. I'm not confident. I'm hopeful that he can do that fast because there is no other option. The season is rolling now. You're not going to get a week to train. There was a unique opportunity to get the week between Wolves and Everton, but now it's game, 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 game. Like it's been 2 games already since I last did a podcast, and there's going to be 3 games coming up between the 27th and January 4th. So, and then you have Liverpool 4 days after that, and then soon after that there's the Chelsea semi-final, which is it's going to be very little time for practicing. So how do you solve this problem? I think he's going to have to probably mix and match it a little bit. And he's probably going to have to give people consistent runs, which is not something that Teta does a lot. He usually will give you 80 minutes before he subs you out, especially if you're one of his trusted lieutenants. But in this situation, I think he's going to have to, hopefully Martinelli, who had a really good game yesterday against Palace, his best performance in an Arsenal shirt for me, even though he scored quite a bit in the Champions League. That was his best performance in terms of wing play that I've seen from Martinelli. He had that Convo kid as his bread, as his butter, as his meat, as his drink. He was just having his way with that kid. I hadn't seen a game like that from Martinelli for a very long time. That was pure domination of a fullback. He owned that kid for as long as he was on the pitch, more so in the first half than the second. But hopefully the injury to him is not too bad, and we can start to see more of that from Martinelli. Taking the confrontation on, like instead of avoiding the confrontation, go 1-on-1, take your man on. Noni Madueke and Saka, there's an opportunity there as well for Arteta to try and get those boys playing on the same pitch. And the opportunity is one worth a look, because while I think Gyökeres is a guy that needs a chance to be trusted, and we can't be doing that at the expense of the team. I think sometimes he's going to have to play from the bench. And in my opinion, while Kai Havertz is getting back to full fitness, and Jesus is a guy that I like but can miss a lot, but he can also play on the wing, maybe even on the left. Martinelli is out. I know we've never done this before. It's going to sound crazy to some people. Maybe you play Saka as your false 9 so that you can get Noni at right wing. Because I don't like the idea of Noni at left wing. As much as I think he's a good left winger, good-ish left winger, I don't think he can give us enough. I haven't seen enough. First of all, let me be fair. I haven't seen enough on the left that I think he is going to be the best option there. But I think what he gives you from the right, he's trouble for opponents. If you can get 45 to 60 minutes of that kid on the right with Saka on the pitch without pushing him into midfield, maybe you can use Saka as your 9 instead of playing Merino as your 9, because he's got the speed. Saka is strong on the ball. He can give you a lot of what Jesus gives you, knitting play, and he's got a good shot on him. And you get him in central places, he can influence the game in different ways there. I don't know if no one else has thought about this. Maybe it's crazy. Maybe that's why I haven't heard of it, because maybe it's a stupid idea. But in my opinion, I think Bukayo Saka in the central positions, like maybe as a number 9, not all the time, but like in certain game states, instead of maybe subbing Saka off to put on Noni, I think maybe you push Saka to the middle or Saka to the left. That's my second favorite option of moving Saka from the right, is like moving him to the middle at least allows him to operate still in the spaces he likes. He can still use his left foot to cross in. He can dovetail with Noni and Timber or Ben White or whoever plays over there, and Odegaard. He's still close to the side of the pitch we like to see him, and we've been used to seeing him. The left-hand side is a bit too far the other side of the pitch. And I think Saka, by the way, will still give us better output from the left wing than Noni will. I just think we may need to, for the sake of the team, to do, I know Saka is not Messi, but we may need to do what Barcelona did at times with Messi, playing him closer to the middle and playing a lesser player who can give you quite a bit from the right. And I think Noni can give you quite a lot from the right. And I think it might be worth a shot. We have a Niger boy front 3 of Saka in the middle, Eze on the right, the left, Noni on the right. and then you do what you need to do in the midfield. And that gives you Merino as a midfield option, who actually started to play really, really good football this season. I know a lot of times people don't love him in the middle, but I saw a lot of good stuff from him yesterday and in the midfield. And he is starting to show the kind of leadership and maturity and level headedness that a team with so many players who haven't won much before needs. He's a good professional, but also he's an intelligent footballer, Mikel Merino. He is, in my opinion, way, way, way grossly underrated. He's grossly underrated as a difference maker and game manager. And he reads what the game needs from him and does that. And speaking of again, Arteta finding solutions defensively. Scalafiori has played a lot more defense, like central defense in Italy and club level and international level. We haven't seen him a lot in the middle of the defense at Arsenal. Yesterday, I just need to talk about his performance in the center back position next to Saliba. Wow, those two towers next to each other. I think, because I was giving the shout for Calafiori to go center back in the Villa game, and I thought, and there was no Saliba there, and I thought Calafiori and Ben White should have gone center back and flipped it around. Instead of the two guys who were at center back and the two guys who were at full back, I think it would have been better to flip them over and have the fullbacks be at center back. That would have been Ben White on the right center back and Calafiori left center back, and then Timber and Nkapie in the fullback positions. But we didn't do that in that Villa game, and that's bygones now. But I do like the look of Calafiori in the center of the pitch. He's got such authority, and him and Saliba, teams will think twice about pressing those two, which would then give us a lot more time to play on the ball. And they can both play, very high up the pitch, comfortable on the ball. They are, yeah. And Gabriel is obviously, like, we're all waiting for him to come back. I'm not, saying Calafiori long term instead of Gabriel, but my goodness, in the absence of Gabriel, I think that guy is a great option. Great option. And that allows you to play Miles a little bit more, and Nkapie can share minutes over there because he's also coming back from a surgery in the summer. We forget that because he's played, consistently since Gabriel's been out. But so I think Arteta has found ways to solve options defensively. This today, I'm just kind of really trying to think hard, and I think the Saka movement across to the center, maybe second best to the left. I think something can be worked there because you can trust Bukayo. And then that means you have a very high level performing Noni on the right. You can trust him. And then all you need to sort out is how you can sort out the midfield. I think the midfield three of Zubimendi, Declan Rice, and Odegaard is Mikel Arteta's preferred midfield three, and I like it too. However, I think you can find ways of keeping those three guys fresh by playing two out of those three, from the start. Like maybe instead of playing Odegaard in the, all three of them with Odegaard playing as a flat three, maybe some games you can play Odegaard next to Rice or Zubimendi with Eze in that central 10 position. Because Odegaard, one thing that's underrated about Odegaard, I know a lot of people get frustrated with him, and I get frustrated with him with how long he holds on to the ball. But I think Odegaard is such a good player that, like, I don't think we're better without him. I think he helps us open teams up. He's never shy to call for the ball. He never hides. I love a player like that. The level of confidence and the level of support he shows up for his teammates, you can't be better without that. And I still think he's an underrated defender. I think Odegaard is one of our best defenders in the team. And so if you're playing him next to Rice or Zubimendi, while you give the other two a break because we don't have replacements for them. Well, we may think we have a replacement for Odegaard, which again, I'm not sure we do, but I think we've found ways of coping without Odegaard. I don't know if we have ways to cope without Zubimendi or Rice. So like in order to not overplay them, I think sometimes you may have to start one of them on the bench, especially in home games, and play Odegaard next to one, and then Eze in the 10. That way you have your Eze in the middle in the number 10, especially in games where you're playing Gyökeres as your number 9. It seems that Gyökeres thrives with a player that plays closer to him, where he can collaborate a little bit. And Eze, more so than Odegaard, plays close to the striker. Odegaard will swing to the left, to the right. He will swing in between the center backs. Odegaard roams. He just goes all over the place, trying to create numerical advantages, trying to push us up the field. Eze doesn't get involved in all of that stuff. He gets involved in finishing. So like Odegaard can do the work that he likes to do, which is take us to the promised land and then have someone else do the hard thing, which is put the ball in the net. I think that's the one way, for me anyway, we can solve some of this constipated attack that we're seeing. I think Arsenal's attack looks constipated a lot because we do take too many touches and we are very Odegaard centric. However, I don't think that's his fault. I think it's because he's a guy who likes to take responsibility. I'm not blaming him for being who he is. He needs to show that level of personality. However, I think playing him deeper means maybe the ball moves a little bit further away from him, and then he can join later on and then take shots, from different range, because he does have that in him. But maybe when he's playing so close to the front line, sometimes he thinks pass first, and maybe you need a shoot first player like Eze in there, or even a Saka behind Gyökeres. I don't care. I just think if you're gonna play your best players, you have to find solutions with them. You know what I mean? I don't think keeping Saka and Odegaard out of the team is the solution. I know when Noni has had good games, people talk about, and when Saka is fit, how do you find a way for Bukayo Saka to be in the team? I don't care where. I do actually care. It has to be in one of those front three positions, right? No left back, no crazy solutions, no left 8, no number 8 position for Saka. Play him in those front three positions. At worst case, in a 4-2-3-1, behind Gyökeres. He can figure it out. Then you have Noni in his best position, and you have to solve the left a little bit. And I think you still have, for now, the ability to ride Trossard and Calafiori. They have a really good understanding. Even yesterday, Trossard comes on, boom, boom, gets the ball down the left, plays it in to Ricky Calafiori. He makes a run, dots behind the defense, one touch from Calafiori. Trossard is through, boom. And another favorite Trossard moment yesterday was him getting the ball, spinning, doing like a little donut close to his box, drives the ball to the right, releases, gets the ball back from Odegaard. He's running right through the pitch, sets up actually the corner that we get, that leads to the Jesus shot that gets saved. Trossard, that's all about Trossard and him showing personality. Now, there's a player who likes to take a risk and who's a gambler. So Arteta needs to find a way to balance that not just the style of play in terms of what people look like when they have the ball, but the kind of the psychological profile of the team. I think he has to find ways to balance that out. I think sometimes we have too many guys who are looking for the perfect play, who are very risk averse because they don't want to be counted on, and obviously you don't want to create transitions on purpose. But without taking those gambles, you don't open teams up. And when you're playing against a set defense, you need people who are going to take the risk, people who are going to show personality to take the chances. And so that's the other part. I think you need to find ways to get Trossard in the team and Eze in the team, because they do different things to the guys in your midfield. If you're playing your midfield of all three, Rice and Zubimendi and Odegaard, against low blocks, I think you're missing out an opportunity there in some instances. I think that midfield, I think you should start it in all away games, maybe start them 3. That could be maybe a policy. Start them 3 midfielders, Odegaard, Rice, Zubimendi for all away games. And then for home games that aren't against Liverpool or Man City, you start one off Rice and Zubimendi next to Odegaard. Maybe you play Eze in midfield, as a left 8, or you play Odegaard as a double 6, and then Eze in the 10, and they can switch who's going up, who's going back. Because if you have any intentions of using Eze in midfield, that might be one of the best ways to integrate him, is when you're playing it, home games, and trust your defenders to do the defending, because we've bought some really good defenders. So anyway, I wanted to come on and just talk about this attacking issue, because I know I'm not the only one who sees it, but I'm just curious to see what people are thinking is the problem here, and what people are thinking specifically, no, more so than the problem. What are some of the things that can be done? Curious to hear your ideas about what you think can be done to solve the problem. I think there's a part of it that's inescapable. I think in final thinking, I think there's a part of it that's just going that it needs time. But I think there's a part of it that's also required for the coach to balance the psychological profile of the players he has in the team at the same time and who plays with who. I think he has to figure that out like very quickly and then commit to something where people are getting consistent game time, especially if like it's a home game or away game, that kind of thing. People need to be getting consistent playing time because this three three game weeks without game time for certain people, I think it leaves people cold, and then you can't play them, and then when you do play them, it's high stakes, and they haven't played in over a month. And that's not fair. So if we're trying to keep people involved, then let's involve people. And the January window is coming. Maybe you consider a loan for Ethan. Maybe you send Ethan Nwaneri to a team in the championship or a mid-table team in the Premier League or a team in Germany, like RB Leipzig or something like that. But like I'm thinking about him specifically, and I don't think he deserves more time than some of the guys who've been playing. But I think you are again diminishing the value of an asset there if you want to keep him on the bench and not play him when he's like 18 years old. He needs to be getting game time. And it's going to be harder and harder at Arsenal as it gets closer and closer to winning time. So that might be a decision the club has to make. Is give Ethan Nwaneri an opportunity to go play somewhere. All right, guys. Please like, share, subscribe. I will talk to you soon. Cheers.